In the closing years of World War II, a revolutionary aircraft soared through the skies of Europe at speeds never before witnessed in combat. It was the first operational jet fighter in history, a machine that promised to change the face of aerial warfare. This is the story of the Messerschmitt Me 262, the Schwalbe, or Swallow, a jet that arrived too late to alter the war, but early enough to shape the future of aviation. The Messerschmitt Me 262 was a German jet fighter and fighter bomber, designed and built by the Messerschmitt Company. Entering service in 1944 with the Luftwaffe, it was the world's first operational jet-powered combat aircraft. Known to its pilots as the Schwalbe, the Me 262 was a leap forward in technology, outpacing the fastest piston-engine fighters of its day. With its swept wings and twin-jet engines, the Me 262 was a vision of the future, but it was born into a world still dominated by propellers and conventional tactics. The origins of the Me 262 trace back to pre-war German interest in jet propulsion. Initial design work began as early as 1938, but the project faced numerous technical and bureaucratic hurdles. The first prototype flew in April 1941, but only under piston power due to delays with Germany's new turbojet engines. It wasn't until July 18, 1942, that the Me 262 achieved its first flight powered by two Junkers Jumo 004 turbojet engines. Despite the promise of jet propulsion, development was hampered by engine reliability issues, resource shortages, and shifting priorities within the German war machine. Political interference, including Adolf Hitler's insistence that the Me 262 be adapted as a fighter-bomber rather than a pure interceptor, further delayed its deployment. Only in 1944 did the Me 262 begin to reach operational Luftwaffe units, by which time the Allies had already secured air superiority over Europe. The Me 262 was an all-metal, swept-wing jet aircraft, featuring a streamlined fuselage and tricycle landing gear. Its most distinctive feature was its two underwing-mounted Junkers Jumo 004 turbojet engines, each producing around 1,980 pounds of thrust. The aircraft measured approximately 10.6 meters in length, with a wingspan of 12.6 meters. The cockpit was positioned well forward, providing excellent visibility for the pilot. The Me 262 could reach maximum speeds of up to 870 km per hour, nearly 200 km per hour faster than the best Allied piston fighters. It had a service ceiling of around 11,500 meters and a typical combat range of 1,050 km. The aircraft was flown by a single pilot and was among the first combat aircraft to use swept wings, a feature that would become standard in post-war jet designs. The Me 262 was heavily armed for its time. Its standard armament consisted of four 30mm 108 Malawian Quachas cannon mounted in the nose, capable of destroying Allied bombers with a single burst. Some variants were equipped with R-4M rockets, giving them a potent standoff capability against bomber formations. The fighter-bomber version, known as the Me 262A2A Sturmvogel, could carry up to 1,000 kilograms of bombs for ground attack missions. The aircraft's speed and firepower made it a formidable interceptor, able to attack and disengage at will against slower Allied aircraft. However, the Me 262 lacked advanced radar or targeting systems, relying instead on the pilot's skill and visual targeting. Its jet engines provided unprecedented acceleration and climb rates, but also introduced new challenges in engine management and reliability. The Me 262 saw combat exclusively during World War II, entering operational service with the Luftwaffe in mid-1944. It was deployed primarily in the defense of the Reich, tasked with intercepting Allied bomber streams and escort fighters. Despite its technological advantages, the Me 262 faced overwhelming odds. Allied air superiority, fuel shortages, and the vulnerability of German airfields limited its effectiveness. The aircraft was most dangerous in the hands of experienced pilots, who could use its speed to devastating effect. Me 262 units claimed hundreds of aerial victories, particularly against heavy bombers, but these successes came too late to influence the outcome of the war. By the time of Germany's surrender in May 1945, fewer than 1,500 Me 262s had been built, and only a fraction saw combat. After the war, captured Me 262s were studied extensively by Allied engineers, influencing the development of early jet fighters in the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union. The Me 262's most significant advantage was its speed. Capable of outrunning every Allied fighter, it could engage or disengage at will. Its powerful 30mm cannon armament made it especially effective against heavy bombers, while its swept-wing design improved high-speed aerodynamics. The Me-262 was a technological trailblazer, demonstrating the potential of jet propulsion in combat. Its introduction forced Allied pilots to adapt new tactics and spurred a global race to develop jet-powered aircraft. In the hands of skilled pilots, the Me-262 was a deadly opponent, feared by those who encountered it in the skies over Europe. Despite its promise, the Me-262 was plagued by significant weaknesses. Its early jet engines were unreliable, with short service lives and frequent failures. The aircraft was particularly vulnerable during takeoff and landing, when its slow acceleration and fragile engines made it an easy target for Allied fighters. Production was hampered by material shortages, sabotage, and Allied bombing campaigns. The Me-262 also arrived too late and in too few numbers to alter the course of the war. Training for new pilots was rushed, and many lacked the experience needed to exploit the jet's advantages. Ultimately, the Me-262 was a glimpse of the future, but it was not the war winner its designers had hoped for. For historical context, the Messerschmitt Me 262 should be read as a product of a specific requirement, not as an isolated machine. It was built by Messerschmitt for Germany, with the intended role of World War II jet fighter and fighter bomber. Its first flight is recorded as July 18, 1942 under jet power, and its service entry is recorded as 1944 with Luftwaffe operational units. Those dates matter because they place the aircraft inside the technology, doctrine, budget pressure, and threat assumptions of its era. The technical story also depends on how the airframe connected structure, propulsion, systems, and crew workload. Key recorded details include crew, 1 pilot, engine, 2 Junkers Jumo 004 turbojet engines, structure, all-metal swept-wing jet aircraft, weapons, for 30mm cannon and optional rockets or bombs, mission, interception, fighter operations, and fighter-bomber missions. In practical terms, an aircraft is never just an engine or a wing. Range, speed, radar, sensors, targeting equipment, weapons, avionics, fuel capacity, maintenance access, and mission planning all decide whether the design can do useful work repeatedly. The operational record of the Messerschmitt Me 262 is tied to World War II. Those examples show how the aircraft performed away from brochures and test figures. Combat service, patrol work, reconnaissance, training, deterrence, and deployment tempo all reveal different truths. A design that looks strong on paper still depends on crews, spare parts, weather, basing, intelligence, rules of engagement, and the ability to return for another sortie. The main strength of the Messerschmitt Me 262 was much faster than piston fighters of its time. Powerful cannon armament showed the future direction of jet combat aircraft. That strength did not mean perfection. It meant the aircraft gave commanders a useful answer to a real problem. The best way to judge it is to ask what mission it made easier, what earlier limitation it solved, and whether operators kept trusting it after the first years of service. The main weakness and limitation of the Messerschmitt Me 262 was unreliable early jet engines, vulnerable during takeoff and landing, arrived too late and in too few numbers to change the war. Its later status is best summarized as retired after Germany's defeat and studied by post-war aircraft designers. Every military aircraft eventually needs newer sensors, newer missiles, changed budgets, aging structures, and different doctrine. That is why the final verdict has to balance reputation against evidence, what the aircraft promised, what it actually delivered, and what it cost to keep useful. A final practical point is sustainment. The Messerschmitt Me 262 required trained pilots, ground crews, inspections, spare parts, fuel, weapons handling, and mission planning before it could produce a useful sortie. That support system is part of the aircraft's real history. Performance figures explain what a machine might do once airborne, but readiness, repair time, training quality, safety margins, and upgrade paths explain whether an air arm could keep using it year after year. The Messerschmitt Me 262 remains one of the most influential aircraft in aviation history. Although it could not change the outcome of World War II, it set the standard for generations of jet fighters to come. Its design and technology were studied by all major post-war powers, shaping the jet age that followed. The Me 262's legacy endures as a symbol of innovation, ambition, and the relentless pace of technological change in wartime. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world's first operational jet fighter, subscribe for more stories from the cutting edge of military aviation.